Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
They want to make sure that everything is just, they're trying to minimize the toolbars, the buttons, the labels. And in doing that, though, they rely very heavily on gestures, maybe more so than, most iPad apps. If you want to get into onion skinning, you might not really figure out right away that you have to tap on the time code of the app in order to get a menu of options that include onion skinning.
Welcome to another episode of iPad Pros. Procreate announced earlier this year that they are releasing a new iPad animation app called Procreate Dreams. Well, that app is now here, and we are joined by John Voorhees from MacStories to dive into this brand new app. John had early access to the app and did a great write-up on MacStories about his experiences with the app so far. Procreate Dreams is out now and available as a one-time purchase for $20. As a reminder, you can support the podcast and get early access to both this podcast and Vision Pros for as little as $1 a month over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. By subscribing in Apple Podcasts to either Vision Pros or iPad Pros, you'll get early access to both. My thanks to everyone that supports the show. And with that, here's my interview with John, all about Procreate Dreams. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Thank you for having me. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, I had Federico on, I think it was for episode 100, so we finally get to the other side of MacStories, although you guys are expanding, I've been seeing.
Yeah, no, I remember that episode. That was a great episode. I really enjoyed it. I actually remember I was in Ireland at the time listening to you guys, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So, for those that don't know who you are, you probably don't listen to other podcasts out there in this kind of Apple world, but can you share a bit on your background and what you do over there at MacStories?
Yeah, sure. So just to give you a little bit of my history at MacStories, I started out in 2015 at the site writing as a freelancer. Federico founded the site in 2009. And so for the first several years, I was just writing there. And in 2020, we kind of mixed things up and we moved MacStories to make it a US company, actually. And the two of us went into, just a bunch of boring business reasons. But that's when Federico and I became business partners, essentially. So I'm actually one of the co-owners of the company now. And it's, Federico's based in Italy. I'm based in the United States in North Carolina. And my role is managing editor, which kind of describes a lot of what I do, which is a lot of the businessy end of things, as well as the writing and the podcasts that we do, like App Stories and so forth. But yeah, we both just kind of divide everything up between the two of us. We've got, the site and Club MacStories and a couple of podcasts like App Stories and MacStories Unwind, and it keeps us kind of super busy.
Yeah, and the time zone difference, while Federico's sleeping, you can be doing things.
A little bit, yeah. Although you'd be surprised at how close our schedules are, because he stays up very, very late and I get up very, very early. So we overlap almost identically, except for about an hour difference in the morning and the evening. That's like there are actually times when he is still up and I'm like, I'm going to bed. I don't know what you're doing up. As
this is iPad Pros, we talk about Procreate Dreams, the big new iPad app that came out recently here. But I'm curious, what is your current iPad setup and what kind of role does that iPad serve in your computing life these days?
Yeah, so I've got two iPads. I actually just had an M2 iPad Pro recently, but that was a loaner from Apple because I was testing Final Cut Pro and Logic. But my core iPads are a 5th generation iPad Pro, so the one that came out in 2021. Okay. That's got the one
right before the M1. It has the new cameras with LiDAR and the Magic Keyboard is when that kind of came out alongside it.
Right. So I've got that with, a terabyte of storage and Wi-Fi and cellular. And so that's it plays really the same role for me as a MacBook Air. It's my portable computer. And I just kind of use it interchangeably with the MacBook Air. And the other iPad I use is a 6th generation iPad mini, which is much more of a consumption device. I use it a lot for, reading and watching YouTube and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a great combo.
Yeah. The biggest and the smallest.
Right. Yes. I'm always tempted by that mini, but I've not yet pulled the trigger.
You can actually get work done on them too. I did a story not too long ago where I had it propped up in one of those airline holders in the back seat of an airplane where I jammed the mini in there. I had a Bluetooth keyboard and I was sitting there writing on the tray table because it had my little keyboard on it.
Yeah, someone needs to invent a Bluetooth keyboard with a little nubbin from the ThinkPads. That would be a killer kind of on-the-go setup.
Yeah, it really would be. I did miss the pointer for sure.
Yeah. So iPad mini consumption, you're kind of catching up on articles and videos and stuff on that.
Yeah.
And then you're on-the-go computing, kind of an alternative to a MacBook Air is the iPad Pro.
Right.
How much of MacStories can you interface on that iPad? Is the CMS friendly enough? I know Federico probably does some stuff with that on the iPad.
Yeah, I can do essentially everything that we do at MacStories on an iPad because the CMS, we use WordPress for the website, and that's just got a web interface, so that's perfectly fine, and it integrates with shortcuts if you want to go that route, which I know Federico does. I use the website probably more than he does. And then I do a lot of the production work for our podcasts, so I'm doing audio editing every week, and that Logic is really good for that, but I don't do it a lot, mainly not because the iPad's not capable, but more because the bigger screen you have, the better. So if I am at home and have access to my studio display, it's much easier to edit a timeline on a wider screen than 12.9 inches.
Right, and you don't have the M1 version where you just hook it up into your Thunderbolt dock.
Right.
Gotcha. Yep. And since there is no Ferrite for Mac, the Logic version on iPad is more of a music-based tool than anything else. Yeah.
It is, and I've played with Ferrite in the past, and I like the app, but for me, as a person who works very much spread across Mac and iOS and iPad OS, I like to have as many of my tools be available everywhere as possible.
Yes,
and so for me, Ferrite is it's just another thing to learn and a different way of doing things. And while Logic on the iPad is a little different than on the Mac, there's enough in common that I can move between those two a lot easier than I could learning a whole new app. So I stick with that.
Yeah. And there is no Ferrite for Mac as of yet. And I don't know if that equation would change if that happened or not.
It might. It might, because I know a lot of people who use Ferrite and love it, and the bit that I've done with it, it's been really great. But it's just one of those things, right? I haven't felt like I wanted to cross that bridge, and I've got enough like mail apps in my life already, which is a place where I've decided I have to use more than one app to get what I want. But I don't want to do that with audio editing too.
With Logic, you have to use another app to add chapter markers, and it's like a set of tools for the final product.
Yeah, it really is. So I use Forecast, which is like an app that Marco Arment created to do chapter markers and artwork on the podcasts. And then I also use a series of post-production audio filtering tools. I use like Adobe Audition and something called Hush, which is on the Mac, as well as Isotope, which is kind of an audio production suite that a lot of musicians use, but it does things like gets rid of background noise and that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Nice. Any other general iPad thoughts before we dive into Procreate Dreams?
Yeah, the iPad to me, I love the iPad, and I've been very frustrated with the iPad because nothing happened in 2023 with the iPad, and so to me, it's like. It's just been really it's been a disappointing year because it's been an interesting year for Apple in a lot of hardware respects, but not with the iPad. And I think it's been too long. I mean, I don't expect revolutionary new hardware every single year from the iPad. However, I do expect something more than what we've gotten. And I hope 2024 is going to be a big year. I mean, the rumors are that there's going to be a lot more going on with the iPad in 2024, and I hope that that's correct. I mean, fortunately, we have apps like the one we're going to talk about today, Procreate Dreams, where companies are pushing the boundaries of what can be done on an iPad, which I think is fantastic and shows that there's plenty of a market there for users who are demanding those kind of tools, but it's really kind of taken a back seat this year, and that's kind of a shame. But as a result, I've been doing things like experimenting with Android e-ink tablets because I need my tablet hardware fix, and that's where I got it this year. So
yeah, it's kind of a weird thing because iPads generally the Mini and the Pro are like 18-month cycles, even the Air. Then the regular one normally gets a 12-month revamp, but I don't know if Apple's like we had that new design that's really expensive. Let's have margins be where they need to be or whatever it is. But it's kind of a bizarre year because we don't like it.
It really has been. Yeah, it really has been, and especially with the Pro. The Pro really hasn't changed much, at least the way it looks and a lot of what it does since 2018, and that's a long time.
It is, yeah, and it sounds like we're getting some exciting, at least screen advancements soon. But how much more
I hope so.
That will be, And I'm glad Stage Manager is finally in a happy place for me, at least. Like, that was the big thing. This little tidy OS revision that just makes it so much more fun to use. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's been really the breath of fresh air this year for me, because I really got to the point when that first came out, I just abandoned it. It was just too hard to use. But with the changes, I'm now using Stage Manager all the time, and I've actually gotten to the point where I'm considering abandoning it on the Mac, because the Mac didn't get the same love with Stage Manager. There are a lot of ways now to bring things onto your stage with the iPad that you really can't do anything equivalent to on the Mac, which is a shame because there's just too much setup involved on the Mac. You can't do things like spotlight search and drag something onto your stage, or shift click on the dock and get something into your stage. There's certain things that you can do on the iPad that don't have an equivalent on the Mac, and you end up having to like doing the song and dance of opening a new app, then going back to the stage, dragging something back from the stage onto whatever you've got on your current stage. And it's just a lot of back and forth that I wish Apple would look at and try to eliminate, because the iPad has really come a long way. I mean, I think the iPad has room for more refinement there, but it really is, I think, a pretty good feature now. It's where it should have been when it first was introduced, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And my big hope is we get an M1 iPad mini one of these years, and then you just hook that up to an external display. Great.
That would be really cool.
And you go on the go and you got your little mini. That's my dream.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I really could see it being like, there were rumors like years and years and years ago of an iPod, not an iPad, an iPod that would be like a portable Mac that you would connect it to a screen, and you would use it as a little mini Mac. And the iPad mini really could be that.
It could, yeah.
With enough, with enough power.
Add clamshell mode with the Magic Keyboard with Touch ID. I've been waiting for Touch ID support on the keyboard to come to the iPad for years. Come on, it's right there.
Yep.
But anyways, so Procreate. This is an app that has been beloved for many years in the art world, and novices like myself. I use it to create what I call abstract art of just pretty things, because if I try to draw people or animals, it just doesn't turn out well. How would you describe your abilities as far as an artist goes?
I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I like fiddling around with the app and, doing doodles and creating little pictures, but I'm not really an artist. I mean, I find it very frustrating because I can talk to our designer at MacStories and say, I know what I want and I know what I like, but I can't do it myself. And it drives me a little crazy, but I still enjoy using apps like Procreate, because I find it relaxing to kind of have a creative outlet that's not really something that is going anywhere other than on my iPad.
Yeah.
So,
and I do like using the pressure sensitivity of the Apple Pencil in there. It's an enjoyable activity for me. I'll do calligraphy in the real world, but art itself is a different ball of wax. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's really nice about Procreate, and I give the Procreate a lot of credit, is that it's a paid upfront app, which is fairly rare these days, and I think that makes it a lot more accessible to more people because, like, I know for me, like, it wouldn't make sense for me to have a subscription art app really, because I just don't use it enough or get enough out of it to make it worth a subscription pricing model. But, Procreate is a one-time payment, and I've certainly gotten the value out of it. I do wonder how these paid upfront apps for a company like them supports. They have like a team of 80 people working on these apps. And they're working with like a big PR firm in London. And I got to imagine
the brushes, you can buy those as add-ons like DLC. Is that a big business for them?
I have no idea. But I suspect that they do a lot of enterprise and school licenses where they're probably signing up hundreds of people at a time as opposed to just onesie twosies like you and me.
Yes. That would make sense for them. So, in your write-up about Procreate Dreams, this is a new animation app from Procreate. One tidbit I thought was pretty interesting is this is 5 years in the making. Did you get any other kind of background tidbits when you were getting briefed on this app we're sharing?
A little bit. I mean, it was 5 years in the making, as you said, and I had a 4 a.m. briefing for this app, which was like just absolutely brutal because the people were spread out in Australia, London, and the US. And I got up and was very blurry-eyed, and they mentioned how they'd been doing it for 5 years. The other thing I think is very interesting about this app is that it leans very heavily on the Metal frameworks. And, you probably hear about Metal in the context of games most of the time because, it's a graphics framework that gets the most out of the iPad's GPU, but it obviously also works well with imaging apps, animation apps, that kind of thing. And with Procreate Dreams, I think the target base iPad OS version is 16 for this. So it supports all of the iPads that are out there, I believe. But by targeting 16, they've got not quite the most recent version of Metal, but one generation ago Metal. And Metal has come a long way over the last few years. And that allows them to do some pretty incredible things in terms of loading times, size of projects, all of that to make things possible that you couldn't have done a few years ago.
Yeah, I noticed the trackpad, if you just hover over the timeline, it'll just real-time play back the whole animation, it's nice. I mean, because it's rendering this. This isn't like you're playing back a video. It is something different. It's animation. It's computationally doing stuff versus just playing back a AV file.
Right, exactly.
So, have you explored other animation apps in the iPad family of apps? Because I've been looking, and there doesn't seem to be a huge number of them.
Yeah, there really aren't. I mean, there are things that can do some of what Procreate Dreams is doing. There's Loom with 3 O's in it, that got an ADA a few years ago. It's kind of a flipbook tool for doing 2D animation, which is something that Procreate Dreams does too. It doesn't have all the features, but it's a good, accessible, beginner type of app that you can use. So that's a good one that's out there. Adobe Fresco does some of this too. It's interesting. There's a lot of crossover these days between image and video apps and animation because there are a lot of video apps that will allow you to overlay some sort of animation onto a video. And Dreams has the ability to bring in video and images into your animations, but it's first and foremost an animation tool, whereas a lot of these other ones are first and foremost image editors or video apps, right? So Fresco is a little closer to Dreams in that Adobe Fresco is a painting and drawing tool, and it has animations built into it. But of course, that there are some free features, I think, of that app, but to get the full thing, you need to have a Creative Cloud subscription to Adobe.
Gotcha. Yeah, and then I remember Boinks has iStop motion, but I'm not sure if that's still
right
on later OSs. an older app that's kind of a fun style of animation, especially I think for kids to just like play with their action figures, make them do stuff is like a fun thing.
Yep. Yeah, there's another one called Stop Animation Studio that's a little bit like that too, I think, where you can take like Lego figures and make little movies with them and stuff like that. Yeah.
Stop motion's it's a whole different world, and it
really is.
Yeah, versus where you're actually drawing in Procreate Dreams, that's more using your camera in the real world to make stuff move, which is
right.
Yeah, which is fun. So for those that are big into Procreate, is there a way to send over some of your artwork into Dreams? I couldn't find like an obvious way to do this.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, that's a good question. And I think one of the things that they told me during this briefing that I had was that the format for the Procreate format underlying the drawing has been updated. And I don't know that it's been updated in the main Procreate app yet or not. Yeah. And whether that might allow them to do importing into Dreams. Dreams is its own file format. It's a .dreams file. So it doesn't seem that you can, which is kind of a shame. You can import things like photographs and movies, videos, that kind of thing. But you can't, as far as I can tell, you can't do the actual Procreate drawings from that app itself.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and maybe a future update enables that, because you are drawing in layers and stuff in Procreate standard, so you'd think you'd be able to pick out certain layers that you could animate and whatnot.
Right.
But yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we'll see if that comes over time. How much of the core Procreate app is there in Dreams? Like, are there any tools that are obvious misses that you hope make it into Dreams one day?
Not from the standpoint of someone like me, who's kind of a casual Procreate user. It's, I think that that's one of the strengths of Dreams, is that if you've ever used Procreate before, you're going to feel right at home, because you open the app and anything you've created, you've got a gallery of what you've created, very much, file provider type of interface where you can just tap on whatever you've created and pick up where you left off. But then once you're in the app itself, there are the same tools that you'd see from Procreate. You've got like a drawing tool, a layers tool, the brushes, the smudging tool, and the color wheel, which is unique to Procreate. All of those things are in there so that if you create a timeline, because that's the difference between Procreate and Procreate Dreams, is that here you're drawing very much like you would in Procreate, but it's on a timeline as opposed to just on a static canvas. And so there are various modes that you work in, and if you're in the drawing mode where you're actually creating the art, those tools are all exactly like you would experience them in Procreate itself.
Okay. And third-party brushes can get imported into this app?
They should. I've never used a third-party brush, though, so I'm not exactly that familiar with how third-party brushes work. But I don't think that they've changed the format for the brushes themselves.
Okay. Yeah. And then who is this app for? Is it, novices like myself, or is it all the way up to professionals? Like, would someone make a 90-minute feature film with this tool set?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it works I think it scales pretty well from simple casual use cases on up to professionals, because one of the things that I think Procreate itself, the drawing app, is very much like that, because the number of tools that you're managing at any one time is relatively limited, which I think makes it easier for someone to get into it. The thing that I find maybe a little hard with both Procreate and Dreams is discoverability at times, because they want to make sure that everything is just, they're trying to minimize the toolbars, the buttons, the labels. And in doing that, though, they rely very heavily on gestures, maybe more so than, most iPad apps. And that is good because it's really taking advantage of the iPad's unique capabilities. On the other hand, it does require a little bit of a learning curve to explore the UI and really figure out what everything does. Because, for instance, you might not think to yourself, oh, I want to do onion skinning, which is where, you draw a picture and then you move to the next frame and you see a shadow of the prior frame so you can kind of smoothly animate a character across the screen. if you want to get into onion skinning, you might not really figure out right away that you have to tap on the time code of the app in order to get a menu of options that include onion skinning, which... So, okay, that's a place to put it. I mean, you see it and you think, well, this was designed by people who are running out of places to put things at times, because they're trying to there's really something behind almost all these controls. There's long press controls, there's tapping on various elements, and it just requires a little exploration to really figure out what is there and what you can do.
It took me a couple minutes just to find how to get back to the title screen. Oh, I click on that little thing, I think the name of the project or something.
Right, yeah, it's exactly. And that, I think, is a little bit of a barrier, but even so, I think that it's the app, because it doesn't overwhelm you with controls right out of the box, it does make it easier for someone to just kind of sit down, have the canvas in front of them, and start drawing, and then kind of think to themselves, all right, well, I've drawn this person and I want to move them from the left side to the right side. How do I do that? If you have that kind of curiosity in you and you want to tap around and figure out where things are, you can figure out how that works. So I do think it works pretty well for the novice. I mean, I have yet to explore every corner of this app because it is really very, very deep. I mean, you open it up and you think, oh, there's not much to this. It's like, here's a place that I draw, and here's a little timeline below, and there's a few buttons. But you realize very quickly that, oh, yeah, the playhead, if you tap on the playhead, here's all the options you can get if you tap on the playhead. And, oh, and here's if you do this, you got all these other options. And there's a lot of things you can do. So it does pay to explore. And based on the examples that came with the app, I think that there really is serious animation work that can be done, like on a commercial level, maybe even a feature-length film here, because I was amazed by some of the stuff that Procreate showed off in terms of what is possible here. And I know in their press release they had a quote from someone who worked on The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast for Disney, who was blown away by it and thought that you could, and said that this is going to lead into a resurgence in 2D animation and film length stuff that people can create on an iPad. So in that sense, it really is opening up tools that probably would have cost tens of thousands of dollars years ago for animation studios to someone working at home in the evenings, as their side project, building their creation and animating it and then distributing it somehow.
Yeah, for $20.
Right, exactly.
And yeah, in one of those sample projects, I noticed, they have different scenes, and then you can open that scene and it's kind of self-contained there. How do you actually create these different scenes and kind of like for these longer form projects that you can do in this app?
Yeah, I don't think that there's like necessarily a right or wrong way to use scenes in Dreams. I mean, I think what it allows an animator to do is to break things up into manageable chunks, because you can create pretty complex animations here. Your timeline can be, it supports layers. So you can have multiple layers. You'll have an audio layer. You'll have your drawing layer. You'll have a keyframing layer, all sorts of different layers that can be added onto this. And I don't think that there's a way in the app itself to stitch them together, if that's kind of what you're suggesting, or whether you would do that separately, like maybe export out video and then stitch them together, or whether you would take individual scenes and kind of then paste them end to end as you kind of completed each scene into a separate animation that's longer, if you follow me. Right. That I think might be possible.
Yeah, because if you're looking in a studio, you'd want the ability to have a master file that you can add different scenes to from other files, I'd imagine. With a team working on it, yeah.
Right.
And then what is the actual process of I drew this dog, and the next frame I'm going to move his leg? Like, do you have to redraw the entire dog, or is there a way to just like move that one aspect of the drawing?
They do have an onion skinning thing you can do, or you could, but I don't know that they copy one frame to the other and then allow you to make changes to it. That's something that came up during the briefing that I had. That it's something that they're looking at. But there are a bunch of different ways to animate things here. You can do it by hand drawing. You can draw your creation and then use something called performing, which allows you to select an image and then use the Apple Pencil or your finger to move it through a scene. So, you know, the example they gave for us was they had a witch, and I know this is in their handbook. They had a witch flying on a broom through the sky, and we got a demo of this where the artist just selected the witch. First, she selected the witch's hair and moved the hair with her finger as the animation played, so that it gave it some movement as she flew through the air. And then she took the entire witch on the broom and her whole body and moved it up and down and then back and forward, shrinking it through the scene, because you can scale things just like you would in an image editor. You know, you grab the handles and make it smaller so it looks like she's out in the distance, and then make it bigger so she's more in the foreground. And she did this over a period of time, over the length of this animation. And it's really kind of amazing, because what then the app does in the background is it's adding keyframes, which are, I mean, I'm no animator, so I'm probably going to butcher the explanation of this, other than it's like points in the timeline that define movement from point A to point B. And then the app smoothly animates from A to B. And so instead of, you can do those you could do those things manually. Like you could go in and say, I want this to be a keyframe. So I have the dog on the far left, and then I want the dog in the middle. So you'd go at the beginning of the timeline, you'd make a keyframe with a picture of the dog on the left, and then you'd go to the middle, put the dog in the middle, and that would be, you know, maybe at second 5, and then the app would take care of getting the dog from A to B, from the left side to the middle. And with this witch, it was the same kind of thing. It was more complex than that, because it wasn't just a linear movement. It was moving up and down and scaling too.
Yeah, and if you're doing like an arc, you need that middle keyframe to know, hey, I'm making a halfway circle thing versus just going left to right. Yeah,
exactly. And that's kind of the power of performing, is that if you're doing that manually, you'd have to create a lot of different keyframes to make sure you're following the arc the way you want it to go. But by being able to do this by hand with the Apple Pencil, the app just picks up what that curve is that you want, which is pretty cool.
And something I noticed really nice as a touch is when you remove your finger from the screen or Apple Pencil, it pauses the performance, which allows you to change from, say, moving the character to changing the size, because those are two different points your finger would be positioned to do that. So that's a nice touch.
Yeah, it works really well that way. I mean, I think that's a really cool thing. And I think that performing really is one of those things that sets us apart from maybe animating it with other types of devices, because it really does show off what's possible with something like the Apple Pencil, because a lot of it does such a nice job of interpolating what your intention is without you having to go through and manually pick pixel positions, picking from a pixel grid on a graph where you want an object to be. You just do it in a very natural way, manipulating the actual image with the Apple Pencil, and let the computer do the work to figure out what that means from a keyframe standpoint.
Yeah. And you can also do things like animate text. You can put text in this app, and you can move that text around, resize the text. You could overlay it with real-world videos and photos.
Which I think is an important point, because I think that this shows what this app is for. I mean, sure, you can make animated short films with this, or you can, I can do my doodles and make them move. But there's room here for like YouTubers to add text overlays on their videos, or other images kind of animating in and out of their videos. There's room here for like people who are social media managers who maybe have like a static image. I know I've played with that a little bit, where like sometimes we'll release some sort of a link to an article we did on MacStories, and I can do it as audio, and I can have a static image related to the article, but then to make it more interesting, maybe add some sort of animation to it. There's a lot of little use cases here, I think, that are possible.
And when you start a project, there are social ones that are optimized.
There are.
Yeah, there's a square one I noticed, and then the pure social one, which is, I guess, the TikTok kind of size and all that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm curious if they'd ever add this feature of, I want to start with this video I made for YouTube and say LumaFusion, import that whole video and have that be like, because right now you get to say how long your video is from the get-go. I wonder if they'd ever consider adding like, import this video as a starting point and go from there.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, I think that there's definitely a place for that kind of thing. I think it's partly a perspective, because this is first and foremost an animation app, not a video app, right? And so I think that's why it's not like that now. But I do think that would be a nice thing to add. I mean, you can figure it out though. I mean, you bring in the video and then just manually manipulate the timeline to fit over the length of the video and then add stuff. So it's doable. It's just not, I don't think it's not, there's not like a video starting point, I guess, is the way I would put it. Right.
Now, you have an iPad mini and an iPad Pro 12.9.
Yeah.
The mini, I believe, has a funky aspect ratio that's not 4:3, and the 12.9 is the standard iPad aspect ratio.
Right.
I'm curious, did you play around when you create a new project? One of the options is your iPad screen size. Is that always 4:3, or if you have a mini, will it do the mini's screen size?
I will admit I have not tried it on the mini, so I'm not entirely sure. I hope so. I sure hope it works that way. I mean, the mini just struck me as like probably a little small of a small canvas to work on for this, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then they have options to go as little as 12 frames per second all the way up to 120. 12 seems easier to create longer stuff with, but how much of a trade-off is there with reducing the frames per second, you think? And
I haven't really noticed any difference in terms of like performance or how any of it looks. I mean, what I'll say is what I've done is I haven't created any long form animation myself, but I took some of the ones that come with the app and created a new project and then imported those animations into mine and varied the frame rates, and they were completely smooth and seemed to work perfectly well either way. I mean, I think that there are speeds that are more natural for certain kinds of animations. I mean, and then I think the app kind of acknowledges that because they're labeled things like for television versus, anime versus
I didn't know anime was 15 frames per second. That's kind of
I thought that was kind of interesting. That was new to me too. And I actually am still looking at the beta. I don't know if there was like an anime example in the beta. I don't know if it's in the final, but I think it is kind of running at a lower frame rate.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And at the back, it's like, oh, that's probably pretty accurate. Yeah.
Yep.
The blend modes. Do you know what these do? They can be applied to like an entire scene.
Yeah. So my understanding is this is coming from Procreate, and this kind of goes to your question a little bit about whether there's anything missing from Procreate. And the answer is kind of no, I think, because blending is one of the ways to edit layers in the Procreate drawing app itself. So you can do things like multiply the colors or darken the scene and that kind of thing. And those same tools are brought over into Dreams as well. So you can adjust your drawing and on a kind of a layer by layer or combined layer basis using the blending, which I think is just affecting multiple layers at one time. A little beyond my artistic skills, but I think that's essentially what it's doing.
And then the other option I noticed in that same area of the app was this ability to apply clipping or layer mask. Do you know how the masking works in Dreams?
It works pretty much like you would expect in any image editor. I mean, you can apply masks so that you can edit just regions of an image, of a layer, as opposed to, the entire thing at once. So again, that's kind of a thing coming over from the Procreate drawing app, is it's got the same concept of clipping masks and that sort of thing.
Okay. And then something I noticed right away when I was starting out my first animation, not a great one. I was just like playing around some text and stuff. But you have the screen size or the animation size. You get the little frame border. Then you can keep drawing outside of that. Is the whole concept of that is stuff outside the frame will, in a couple frames, enter the frame and leave it, and you want that space as a buffer?
Yes. I mean, that is the concept of the stage versus the actual frame itself. And this is one of the things I think takes a lot of getting used to when you're doing animation as opposed to drawing, because apps like Procreate, when you start a drawing or a painting, you're thinking about a canvas, you're thinking about a defined space. Whereas with animation, it's a lot more like filming a play on a stage where the characters are coming from off stage onto stage and then leaving, and it's changing over time what you're seeing in front of you. And so what you can do is you can start your character, you can have your initial character all the way off the screen, and you can see that it's kind of a semi-opaque view on the iPad. So you've got your bright white square in the middle, which is your actual stage, what is actually being animated and filmed, but you can have your character just off to the left or the right or wherever, or up or down, and slowly come onto the stage. And the example that they gave us during a quick demo during the briefing was they made a scene with mountains and the sun in the sky. And then off the stage below the drawing was the moon. And then they animated it so that it would, switch. So the sun would set and the moon would rise. And that was just a pretty simple animation of rotating that layer from the moon being low to the moon being high and switching spots with the sun. And as simple as it is, it's really effective because it looks fantastic as the moon starts coming up above the mountains that are in the foreground. So you can do it requires, I think, a new kind of thinking when you're drawing. Is where do you want things to be over a period of time, and how do you do that? And with Procreate Dreams, that could be having the moon below the frame and rising above into the frame, or it could be having a character on the left and moving right. It could really be just about anything.
Yeah. Something I was just thinking about, I'd love an ability to have, you can import brushes and stuff. I'd love to have just like a place to throw these, like an image of fire that I can animate, and like these different like effects almost. So like I was thinking Upgrade could throw their little video socials into this app and like animate to Jason's head on fire or something like that. Like something that's quicker and easier than drawing fire every single time. There's no way to like save off just like an image, like fire drawing and
like individual assets or something like that, like an assets library. I don't know. I don't think that there really is. I mean, I think the best you could maybe do would be to have a bunch of little projects and maybe copy things out from one to the other, maybe.
You can copy from one project to another if you need to.
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And then the whole mixing the real world with animation, we talked a little bit, but I do think that's a cool thing. Like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you can kind of make a 2D. I say 2D, but the person will be in 3D still.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, and it's like there's some good tutorials online already, which I think are worth looking at, because one of the things you could do, for instance, is say you have a photo, you can long press it and use the select subject feature of iPad OS and just pull in just the thing that you want with the background transparent. And then you can draw that way. It's like overlaid on your drawing and it looks like it's part of the drawing. So that is an option for you to do. It's a good way to add photos to to your animation. You can do the videos and then draw over them, or you could even bring in maybe other art assets, other drawings, overlay those over a video, and then move them around the scene using the various controls and the keyframing to move, a drawing across and behind the people. Because that was another demo we got was it was a short video of a woman dancing that looped, and just to show how you could do it, the Procreate artist created like it was just a simple brush stroke that looked like a moving flame across the screen. And so it would kind of circle around and it would come in and look as though it were going behind her, and then emerging from in front of the dancer, and then kind of move across the screen and then loop back around behind her. And it was really just a very simple animation, but because she was able to do it in onion skinning, doing just like a little bit of the line at a time, and then Procreate Dreams was taking care of the keyframing, it all kind of came together very smoothly.
Yeah, if we were still in the iPod era, this would be a total Apple ad of we made this iPod ad with Dreams, because they totally do that where they like. Yep. That's a great example. That would be exactly the kind of thing that you would do with this sort of thing, because it supports audio. We haven't really talked a lot about the audio, but you could have an audio track, and it supports all the kind of common audio file formats like WAV and MP3 and whatnot, and with that, not only can you have music, but you could do voiceover, for instance. You could do for this podcast, you could have the podcast art in a short video. You could lay a track of like a clip from this episode behind it. And then you could create some sort of animation played over top your show art, for instance. I mean, just to kind of make it visually more interesting than just a picture of the show art, a static picture of the show art in a Mastodon post, for instance. You could do that. And that's something that I've been playing with and experimenting with a little bit, because I think it's one of the things that and this is like a philosophical marketing thing as somebody who does this for a living, but I feel like there are a lot of ways, like we write, and not everybody reads. Some people like their thing. Some people like video. Some people like audio. That's why we do podcasts. That's why we write articles. And I think if you can meet people where they're at and give them something interesting, you're more likely to capture their attention and imagination, and maybe they become also a reader. Yeah, so that's why I experiment with those kind of things. Yeah, it's interesting. Some people don't want to listen; they just want a transcript so they can read what was talked about.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So the Apple Pencil, how is this used? Like, is it just standard stuff? Is there double tap in this app in any way, or is it just standard drawing and then some interface elements you can use it with as well?
Yeah, I think it's fairly standard. I mean, it uses the Apple Pencil in a lot of ways that Procreate also does. And as I mentioned, with things like Perform, it can be used to drag the characters around the screen to create the automatic keyframing. So it's about what you would expect from a drawing app, I think. I mean, I don't think there's anything that's particularly unique with the way the Apple Pencil is used. But I do think that having the ability to, with a lot of, this is true with a lot of iPad things. I mean, where the iPad really shines is when it's with a project that you can actually manipulate the content that you're creating, where you're closer to what you're working on, as opposed to the indirection of using like a mouse or a trackpad or a keyboard with a Mac. With the iPad, you're actually in there touching what you're working on and moving it around. And I think that it works really well with animation.
Yeah. As far as audio, we talked about voiceover, but lip sync I have not seen in any examples from Procreate. Is that probably a challenge that is pretty hard to accomplish in this app?
I think it might be. I think that the way you would accomplish that probably would be to animate it first and then have someone voice it over while watching the animation. You know what I mean? And then layering them on top of each other, because I don't think that there's no like built-in voice-over tool per se, but you can accomplish it other ways, I think, by doing it in stages.
Yeah, I don't even know how it's done. In when Lion King was made, was it animated, then they brought in the voice actors, or did they perform the voice first? And animate to that. I don't know the whole lineage of how that's gone.
Right, and it might be that it would be potentially a combination of both, where if maybe someone did the voice acting and it was off a little bit, you could use maybe the keyframing to adjust how the mouths of the characters and things were working as the words were being spoken. So, you kind of do a little bit of both. You have somebody maybe voice over a rough cut of whatever you're animating, and then you can go back and kind of adjust the animation a little bit to match what's being said if it's close enough.
Yeah. And then something that this app we've talked about before is it's very touch first, but I remember with Procreate, there was this whole marketplace of third-party like keyboards with all the hotkeys programmed in there. Are there some hotkeys for this app? Do you see like could the same Procreate keyboards for that app work here, or are they different? Are they different?
I don't know. I think that's to me that's a really fascinating market. That's like one of those accessories, because I've seen them, like, you've got like, they're a little bit like a Stream Deck or something, I suppose. You'll have like various input devices for Procreate. I don't know if they work with this. There's not a lot of keyboard shortcuts for this app.
No,
itself.
I tried even Command Z to undo. It's like, that does not work.
No, and I think that's because I don't know that this app would be great for working with in a keyboard. Maybe in the later stages where you're editing it, there might be room for more keyboard-driven editing. But in terms of the creation and the drawing, I think it's very much intended to be an outside the keyboard case type of app, sitting on an easel or on a table where you're actually doing the drawing. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of that kind of thing down the line to refine the app, but right now it really doesn't do much with that sort of thing.
Yeah. And then as far as exporting your final project, there's video, and then there's a couple others, I think.
Yeah, you can export a series of PNGs, for instance, which I assume that's so that you can do things like generate GIFs, because GIFs are really just a series of still images. I don't think it actually exports GIFs itself, but you can do a series of PNGs, which maybe that could be just for storyboarding purposes, or maybe you could stitch them together into a GIF or something like that. But yeah, it's primarily a video export thing.
Okay. Yeah. I'm so curious how apps like Procreate will tackle Vision Pro when that comes out next year. Like, will we get some crazy Dreams app where you have your timeline on a separate screen and some way to draw? I don't know.
And I think that's one of those things with Vision Pro that's very much an unknown, which is what degree of control are people really going to have over the software they're using? Is how rough are the controls, right? I mean, is it because, and this is an issue for things like video games too. I mean, you buy a Meta Quest 3 and you've got controllers, and a lot of games are really need controllers to be precise. Not all games do, but a lot of games do. And that's not going to be the case with the Vision Pro. So are those games just out? Is the hand tracking good enough that they can be used? Is it a different type of game? Which is, I think, one reason we haven't heard a lot about games is because they're not going to be great. But drawing is another thing, and some drawing is imprecise, but some of it is also very precise, just like you would probably want with a controller. That's why you have an Apple Pencil, after all, with a very precise tip.
Yeah.
That refreshes at a very high frame rate.
And Apple has not really shown someone just looking down at their desk with the virtual paper. I don't think they want you looking that close in Vision Pro, or also probably your neck down, looking down might be uncomfortable. So,
right, which is why it feels like more to me like the kind of applications that will work best will more likely be things that you would think of on a screen of a computer that's a distance away from you. Like whether it's an iPad in a keyboard case or a Mac with a screen on a desk, be more like, text editors, I think would work fine. Maybe Safari, Mail, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how that market develops and what kind of experiments just don't work. It's like, ooh, this is just not comfortable over anything in 5 minutes. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, anything about Dreams we haven't covered yet that you'd like to?
Yeah, I would suggest that if people are curious about this app, I would take a look at Procreate's handbook, because they have a very nice, in their support pages, a very nice handbook that has kind of step-by-step how you do certain things, because there are multiple ways to animate your things, whether it's manual keyframing, perform, onion skinning, flipbook, all these different things. So check that out. It's a good starting point. But also there's a lot of great YouTube videos here too. I mean, obviously this is a visual medium, and it really shines in the hands of a good artist who can show you how to do things. So I watched a couple of those, and this app's only been out, like a week and a half. It's already got a big following on YouTube, and there are a lot of great videos out there showing you how to do everything from just simple, like taking a photo of I saw one of a guy who took a Fanta bottle and he animated it in from the left, and it was, bulging out on the sides and going in, just little stuff like that. But it demonstrates kind of like what's possible once you have the assets into the app and what you can kind of do with them once they're there.
Yeah, there's such a thriving Procreate creator ecosystem. Like, there are entire people that all they do is Procreate, and if you want to learn, just subscribe and watch their stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
One thing I just remembered I wanted to ask about, is there a way to like anchor some drawing to, say I drop in, as you mentioned, from like the iMessage where you can remove the background. I want to like attach that flame to that, where I'm moving the person, the flame kind of goes with that person. Is that a thing in this app?
Yes, because you can group layers. So I think that you should be able to do it with a combination of grouping the layers and then animating them as a group, as opposed to individually.
Of the skateboard, it seems like it's like, how is the skateboard not losing that logo that they painted onto it? I guess it's probably attached to it in some way.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I start getting a little lost. Like, I look at these, I'm like, oh, well, how would you even do that? But there's a lot of tools in there, and I think if you've used Procreate, you probably have a better idea than I do about it, if you're an expert at it, how to do that. But yeah, there are things in there like that allow you to do that.
Also, there's a lot to learn, but it is a fun app just to just play with, and just as I've always learned, all the apps that I love is, you start using it, you find a new challenge, and then you find a video or a tutorial on how to do it, and then I know how to do that now, and then you just kind of build.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like a back and forth. It's like, figure out something you want to do, try to figure out how to do it. If you can't, go look for a tutorial, or maybe just watch a few tutorials, and that gives you ideas of things you can do and how you would do it your own way, and then use your own assets or drawings and do it that way.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, John, for your time. This has been great learning more about this wonderful app that Procreate just dropped on us at the end of the year here. It's been great to talk to you. I mean, I think Procreate Dreams is a fantastic app. I plan to spend more time over the holidays playing around with it. That's one of the things I like to do in the holiday season, is take a little time off, dive into some more complex apps like this that I haven't used enough, and really learn more about them. And at $20, I mean, I think it's $20 may seem like a lot for the App Store, but I think given the depth and complexity and professionalism of this app, I think it's a real steal, actually. Yeah, it's funny. Back in 2006, when I was really into buying all my Mac apps, and I was a new Mac person, it's like $50, $200. Yeah. It's like nowadays, it's so different. Yeah.
I know. Today, you tell somebody $20 and they're like, have a heart attack.
I know, right? It's such a different world growing up today with iPads and stuff. I can't imagine having like Procreate Dreams as a kid trying to like learn how to do animation. That seems like a fun time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where can people find your work over on MacStories and your other musings online?
Yeah, so just visit MacStories.net. Federico and I do a couple of podcasts too. We have App Stories at appstories.net, and MacStories Unwind, which is like a weekly media. It's really just an excuse for me and Federico to have a fun conversation where we talk about strange differences between Italy and America, and then have some media picks as well. And of course, I'm like on Mastodon. We have little dedicated pages to ourselves. Mine is johnvoorhees.macstories.net, which actually will open up my profile on Mastodon. And there's a file you can follow me from there. I'm on Threads too, John Voorhees, at John Voorhees. So that's another place that people can go.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Enjoyed being here to talk about dreams. It's been fun.
Well, that's my interview with John all about Procreate Dreams. Make sure to check out John's work over at MacStories. And my thanks again to John for his time recording. And my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support this podcast and get early access over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. With that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.